What if I told you there's a hidden build in Block Tales that can deal 6 to 7 damage per turn without breaking a sweat? While everyone's stuck grinding with basic sword combos doing 3 to 4 damage, I've discovered something that completely changes the game's combat meta. In this video, I'm going to expose the exact Super Ball build that's been secretly dominating the Block Tales meta, reveal the specific card combinations that turn your humble ball into a devastating weapon of mass destruction, and show you the advanced techniques that separate the pros from the amateurs, including how to counter spiky enemies that normally hard counter ball builds. But first, let me show you why 99% of players are completely sleeping on ball builds. What they don't realize is that with the right card synergies, this becomes the highest DPS strategy in the entire game. After analyzing every possible card combination and running the numbers on damage calculations, the results were shocking. This build consistently outperforms every other strategy when optimized correctly. Here's what makes this build absolutely broken when you analyze the core card synergies. The foundation consists of 4 essential components that create devastating damage multipliers. First, you need baller cards, maximum of 4 copies. Each baller card increases your ball slot damage by 1, but disables your sword slot completely. Most players see this trade-off as negative. The math proves it's actually the key to unlocking insane damage potential. Next, Power Rush. This single card increases attack power by 1 when your HP drops to 25% or below. While most players avoid low HP situations, this card turns that vulnerability into a significant damage advantage. Then you need Cannonball. Get 2 copies if possible. These make your ball completely immune to spiky and flaming enemies, which eliminates the primary weakness that counters ball builds. Finally, you need 3 charge cards. These apply attack up level 2 to your next attack for 3 SP each. When stacked properly, the damage multipliers become absolutely ridiculous. But here's where the calculations get completely insane. Let me break down the exact numbers that make this build completely broken. When you run the mathematical analysis, the damage potential is staggering. Baseball damage starts at 2. With Baller cards equipped, each one adds +1 damage to your ball slot. That's a potential +4 damage right there, bringing your base to 6 damage. Now here's where it gets spicy. Charge cards apply attack up level 2, which adds +2 damage per card. With 3 charge cards stacked, that's attack up level 6, adding +6 damage to your next attack. So we're looking at 6 base damage plus 6 from charges equals 12 damage. Add Power Rush when your HP is low for another +1, bringing us to 13 damage potential. Perfect Action command timing adds another +1, reaching a theoretical maximum of 14 damage on a single attack. But even without perfect conditions, this build consistently delivers 6 to 7 damage per hit, which is absolutely game-breaking when you consider most enemies have 8 to 12 HP total. This damage output completely destroys any other build strategy when you compare the numbers side by side. The real game changer comes from the optional cards that multiply this effectiveness even further. After testing every possible card combination, certain optional cards create synergies that transform this from a great build into an unstoppable force. Minimize applies small, reducing enemy attack by 2 for 3 turns. This isn't just about damage. You're simultaneously neutering enemy offense while maintaining your devastating attack power. Line Bounce and Comatose are where the math gets absolutely wild. With proper action command timing, this hits all enemies in battle. The damage calculation becomes your full ball damage multiplied by the number of enemies. Against 4 enemies, you're dealing 24 to 28 total damage in a single turn. Softener applies defense down level 2 for 3 turns. When you analyze armor mechanics, this card makes even the highest defense enemies vulnerable to your attacks. The status effect cards create additional tactical advantages. Fireball applies burn level 1 for 3 turns for guaranteed damage over time. Snowball has freeze potential for crowd control. Daze applies dizzy level 1 for 4 turns, disrupting enemy patterns. These optional cards don't just add damage, they create a complete combat solution with answers to every defensive strategy enemies can use. But there's an advanced optimization technique that most players completely miss. When you analyze the deeper mechanics, there are optimization strategies that dramatically increase this build's effectiveness. power rush timing becomes a calculated risk-reward scenario. Instead of healing immediately at low HP, you maintain that 25% threshold to keep the +1 damage bonus active. The math shows this sustained damage increase outweighs the safety of higher HP. Status effect stacking creates multiplicative advantages. Combining burn, freeze, and small effects means enemies are taking damage over time, potentially stunned, and hitting for reduced damage simultaneously. You've mathematically neutralized threats while setting up devastating combos. SP management requires strategic resource allocation. This build is SP intensive, but the damage per SP ratio is superior to other strategies when calculated properly. You front load SP costs for massive damage spikes that end fights quickly. Cannonball mechanics completely change the ball versus spiky enemy equation. Traditional ball builds fail against spiky enemies due to damage reflection. With cannonball immunity, you can attack any enemy type without penalty, eliminating build counters entirely. The optimization data shows this build has mathematical superiority in almost every combat scenario. When you analyze this build against traditional meta strategies, it dominates across every meaningful metric, versus sword builds, higher damage output, better crowd control, immunity to spiky counters. Sword builds cap around 4 to 5 damage consistently. This build delivers 6 to 7 minimum, versus slingshot builds, similar range advantages but superior damage and status effects. Slingshot builds rely on defense penetration. This build simply overpowers defenses entirely, versus hybrid builds. Other combinations sacrifice specialization for versatility. This build achieves both maximum damage and tactical flexibility through status effects. The counter-analysis reveals why this build is so dominant. Spiky enemies that counter most ball strategies, cannonball immunity eliminates the threat. High defense enemies, softener reduces their armor to nothing. Enemy swarms, line bounce hits everything simultaneously. Even SP limitations become manageable when you calculate the damage per resource ratios. You spend more SP per turn, but end fights faster, resulting in better overall efficiency. This build has mathematical advantages against every traditional counter strategy while maintaining superior damage output in standard scenarios. The only limitation is proper card acquisition and BP allocation optimization. The analysis proves this build is incredibly powerful, but implementation requires understanding optimal card progression and avoiding critical BP allocation mistakes. There's specific timing for which cards to prioritize in each chapter, how to manage your BP distribution efficiently, and 3 mathematical errors that'll completely ruin your damage calculations before you even get the build functioning. If you want the complete optimization guide with exact progression paths and advanced calculations, check out my Block Tales deep dive playlist where I break down everything you need to dominate this game's combat system, from fundamental mechanics to advanced strategies most players never discover. Hit that subscribe button if this analysis helped you optimize your gameplay, and I'll see you in the next video where we're diving deeper into the statistical breakdowns most players never see.